The first light of dawn spilled over the prairie like liquid gold, soft and slow, touching every fence post and rooftop in the tired frontier town. Dust rose with the morning breeze, drifting in long ribbons that caught the sun as if the earth itself were exhaling. It was the kind of light that made even broken things glow, and in the middle of that glow walked Clara Mayfield, a girl so small and thin she seemed made of the same dust she kicked up. Her boots were too big, her braids frayed, her dress washed until the color had run into a tired gray. At 12, she already carried the hollowed look of one who had been left behind. Folks in town called her that poor Mayfield child, or worse, the forgotten girl. They said it not cruelly at first, only with the indifference of people too busy to notice she was listening. But indifference, Clara knew, could cut deeper than knives. In the general store that morning, she stood on tiptoe at the counter, a few coins sweaty in her palm. She asked for bread, voice so soft it nearly disappeared under the scrape of Martha Pickens' broom. Martha was the shopkeeper's wife, a woman with lips pinched into a line that never softened. She looked at Clara's coins as though they might stain her fingers. Barely enough, Martha muttered, sliding the loaf with a sigh heavy enough for the whole store to hear. Then she added, louder, pity her father's gone and her mother left her with nothing but trouble. Children snickered near the candy jars. A boy nudged another, whispering about how Clara's family never fit, how she lived on the edge of town like a stray dog. Clara lowered her head, clutched the bread, and slipped out before the shame could chase the breath from her chest. She took the long road home, the one that wound through the tall grass where the town's whispers couldn't follow. The wind bent the stalks in waves, making the prairie look like an ocean she could vanish into. It was there, by the creek that cuts silver through the land, she saw him. A boy, no older than herself, crumpled against a stone. His moccasin was torn, his ankle twisted cruelly beneath him. Blood streaked his shin, and his breath came in shallow gasps. Clara froze, remembering the warnings the town spoke in low voices. Don't you dare go near the savages. But his eyes lifted to hers, and there was no savagery in them, only pain, and a flicker of fear, the kind she knew well. Clara stepped closer, her heart thrumming against her ribs. She knelt, poured water from her tin cup into his trembling hands, and tore a strip from her hem to wrap his wound. He watched her, silent, as if waiting for her to pull away. But she didn't. She stayed until his breathing steadied, until his lips formed a word she couldn't quite understand, but knew was meant for thanks. His name, he told her softly, was Tahu. When the sun dipped low, she helped him to the shade of the cottonwoods, left him the bread from her satchel, and turned back toward her shack with her heart rattling like a wild bird in her chest. Fear followed her. Fear of the town's eyes, fear of what she had done, but beneath it, a strange warmth. For once, her hands had not been empty. They had mattered. That night, Clara lay on her narrow bed, the rafters creaking with the night wind. She pressed her mother's old wooden cross to her chest and whispered to the stars. Was it enough? She asked. Is kindness enough in a world that laughs at it? Far off, at the edge of the prairie, riders moved like shadows against the dying light. Clara never saw them, but the earth seemed to hold its breath, as though it already knew her small act would not vanish into silence. The morning light felt thinner than usual, stretched pale across the roofs and dusty streets, as though the day itself had lost its voice. Clara Mayfield moved through town with her basket, shoulders drawn tight, trying to fold herself into invisibility. But gossip runs quicker than feet, and she could feel the whispers brush against her skin before she even reached the store. Martha Pickens stood outside, her shawl clutched like a badge of virtue, her lips sharp as a sewing needle. She was telling anyone within earshot that the poor Mayfield girl had been seen at the creek, muttering to herself, or worse, keeping savage company. Her words slipped into the crowd like a snake, curling around hearts already eager for judgment. Clara kept her head down, but the heat in her cheeks betrayed her. By the time she reached home, children were emboldened enough to lob stones against her shack, the thuds ringing like cruel laughter. She sat inside on her narrow bed, clutching the wooden cross her mother had left her, whispering against the ache in her chest. The tears came anyway, soft and relentless. It was just past dusk when the sound began, low and steady, like a second heartbeat beneath the earth. At first she thought it thunder, but thunder doesn't grow rhythmic, doesn't breathe with the weight of horses. Clara stood, her hands cold against the wood of the door. When she opened it, the air itself seemed to hold still. 40 Apache riders spread across the clearing, their silhouettes backlit by the dying fire of the horizon. Horses black and chestnut shifted restlessly, their manes flashing under torchlight. The crescent they formed around her shack was as silent and solid as stone. From every house in town, shutters cracked and curtains lifted. Mothers hissed prayers. Fathers muttered curses. Children peered wide-eyed from behind skirts. Clara's breath came quick, her bare feet rooted in the dust. Her shack, so thin, so frail, looked ready to crumble under the gravity of their presence. She clutched her cross tighter, whispering something she could not even hear herself. A single rider dismounted. He was tall, his hair braided with bone beads that clicked softly in the hush. This was Nantan, their chief. His eyes carried the sharpness of flint, but beneath it a depth that was not rage. It was something older, weightier. And then Clara saw him, limping but upright, standing just behind the chief. Tahu, the boy from the creek. His wound was bound now, his face steadier, though he leaned against his staff. When his gaze found hers, it held steady, and he raised his hand to point at her. A ripple passed through the riders. Leather creaked, torches flickered, the weight of silence deepened. Then Nantan stepped closer, and before the whole town, he bent one knee to the earth. From his arms, he drew out a blanket woven thick with colors that seemed to hold the very sky. Sunrise gold, burning red, the deep indigo of shadows fading into dawn. With careful hands, he laid it at Clara's feet, bowing his head low in a gesture of honor. Gasps caught in the throats of the watching townsfolk. Clara's heart surged against her ribs. She stared at the gift, then at the kneeling chief, then at the boy whose dark eyes brimmed with something she had never once seen directed at her. Gratitude without condition. Her breath trembled. For 12 years she had lived unseen, mocked, or pitted. For 12 years she had been small enough to vanish between the words of other people's sentences. And yet, 40 warriors had come not to threaten, not to shame, but to honor her. Martha Pickens, pale as linen, clutched her shawl to her chest, as if it might hide her own shame. The sheriff, who had never once lifted a hand to defend Clara, lowered his hat, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Around them, the town shifted in uneasy silence, as if the ground itself had turned against their cruelty. Clara bent slowly, her fingers trembling as they touched the blanket. The fabric was warm, softer than anything she had ever held. Her throat closed, tears gathering until the world blurred. She looked at Tahu, who gave her the smallest of nods, as if to say, "You saved me, and now they see you." When the riders rose and turned their horses, it was like a tide receding, swift, silent, unstoppable. They left behind only the blanket, and the hush of a town struck dumb. Clara stood there with the gift clutched in her arms, its warmth sinking into her bones like fire in a long winter. She thought her mother. She thought of the nights she had whispered to the stars, asking if kindness meant anything at all in a world that mocked it. Now she had her answer. And so, dear heart, if ever you feel as small as Clara Mayfield, remember this. A single act of mercy can echo louder than cruelty, can summon nations to your side. For even the frailest hand, when it reaches out in kindness, carries a strength the hard and the proud will never understand.